Here we go. All right, so this is the period of the class, or actually pre-class, those who watch the Striving for Eternity Academy live on Monday nights, 8 o'clock, get to give me something to transition from that they think I may or may not be able to do a transition from whatever they give me to the gospel. So tonight's topic is transition from a dry pot roast. To transition to the gospel from a dry pot roast. Can you do that? And the goal of this game is actually so that we can learn to transition any conversation and take it anywhere from whatever someone says into a gospel conversation. So we can be sharing the gospel everywhere we go with everyone. We don't have to wait for God to open opportunities. We can actually make them. So if someone is sitting and talking about a dry pot roast, and I'm going to try to transition that to the gospel. How would I do it? Well, I would probably go back to the days when I used to have my Passover meals. We used to have Passover and Thanksgiving at my grandmother's house. My grandmother, well, dinner was known for one thing. I was convinced that she started the Thanksgiving turkey about 3 days before Thanksgiving and kept it in the oven that whole time. I mean, it was the type of thing when we go over there. I mean, she made a great matzo ball soup, just saying, but her chicken, her turkey, you know, whatever she would cook other than the matzo ball soup, it was like, I mean, it was the type of thing that the Thanksgiving turkey would just dry out your mouth. Like, it would just so dehydrate, I think it just absorbed all the moisture from your mouth to where you couldn't open your mouth and talk. You know, she meant well. She cared so much that she put a lot of time and effort in, maybe a little bit too much in the cooking. But it was something that we kind of all knew that we would have to have a dry turkey. And it's kind of like that a dry pot roast, though I've never actually had a dry pot roast, so I'm kind of comparing. But the reality is that when we have a food that you're looking forward to it, you're anxious for it, and then all of a sudden it just doesn't turn out like you wanted. I actually think that the reason I don't like turkey at all as an adult is because I used to have my grandmother's turkey that was so dry. And if you really look forward to a pot roast, then all of a sudden it's dried out, or the only kind of pot roast you're familiar with is one that's really dry. It turns you away from it. The reality is that, you know, there are many who really they profess to be atheists. And one of the things I love to do with people that are these hardcore atheist type is I love to ask them, what church did you grow up in? You know why I ask that? Because often when they're very angry against the gospel, you know what I usually find? I find that most of the issue is that they are upset with the way they grew up. They grew up in some church that just left a bad taste in their mouth, and they, instead of saying that was their church, they think that's all of Christianity. And just like a dry pot roast can leave a bad taste in your mouth to where you don't want anything to do with pot roast anymore, the same that some people have with Christianity because of a bad experience they had. Maybe typically they've went to a legalistic church, or they didn't like the rules that they think they had to follow. And the reality is what they're responding to is not Christianity and the validity of Christianity, but they're responding to the way they grew up. The real thing that we have to do is ask, what does Christianity teach? Well, it teaches that all of us violate God's law. That's something we all know. Look at the news every day and you're going to hear about how people act in a sinful way. It doesn't mean everyone's going to be as bad as they could be, but it does mean people do things that are wrong. The fact is we can't save ourselves. If we could save ourselves, that's what every world religion teaches other than Christianity, is that you can save yourself by works. But if we could, then there would be no purpose in God having to intervene. We can't save ourselves because it's our works that got us into this mess. Our works are not going to get us out of the mess. So what do we need? We need God to do something. Because our sin is against a holy, infinitely holy, perfect God, we have an infinite consequence. Because of that, we need an infinite being, an eternal being, to pay the fine for us. And the only one that's qualified is God himself. So God came to earth, he became a man, he died on a cross to be a punishment of sin for us, that we might be set free. He became sin that we might become his righteousness and be free from the guilt and punishment of sin and actually be seen by God as having the righteousness of God himself. That's the good news of the gospel. And many churches don't teach that. So if you have a bad taste in your mouth, like a bad dry pot roast, and you want to think that that's all of Christianity, maybe it's just a bad church you grew up in. My encouragement to you is to repent of that and believe the true gospel of Jesus.